The Denver Broncos offense and Bo Nix must bounce back in a big way this week against a stingy and tough Pittsburgh Steelers defense. We'll tell you why the run game will be crucial not only for Bo Nix, but for Denver's offense here on today's episode of the show.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. Make sure you follow us on social media at Cody Roark NFL, at Locked On Broncos. Sayre Bedinger, my co-host, he's still in Disneyland where he's enjoying some time off here. He'll rejoin us next week here for the podcast. But we got a lot to break down here as game prep for the Pittsburgh Steelers officially begins. I want to say thanks to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for making us your first listen. Subscribe or follow on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. A lot to digest here today. We'll obviously talk about the Broncos, their game prep against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not Russell Wilson they're preparing for. It'll be Justin Fields this week, more than likely. We'll dive into that. We'll talk about why the Broncos' run game has to be substantially better this upcoming week if Denver's offense is going to have success, not only just this week, but throughout this season. And Bo Nix, after a rough, shaky debut as a rookie, he needs to bounce back in week 2, and it doesn't get any bigger than a challenge against that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. You'll get all that here on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. Make sure you check out FanDuel here today, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can place a $5 bet and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started here today. Let's dive into it. Let's kick things off here with the biggest subject, obviously, for the Broncos this week going into the Pittsburgh Steelers game. It is surrounding Bo Nix. Yes, a lot of expectations are on Nix to rebound after a shaky performance against the Seattle Seahawks. I did variations of some film breakdowns over there at Mile High Sports on their own YouTube channel and also my social media feeds. If you want to go through and see those film clips, see what Nix did right, see what Nix did wrong, and where he can improve. I think the overall vibe is that he started to play a lot better in the fourth quarter. He started to get into a little bit more of a rhythm there. That was a little bit of a promising sign there. And Denver, if they would have gotten a stop on third down defensively, Nix would have had one more shot to lead the Broncos offense downfield, and who knows how he would have responded in that situation. But he must respond this week as the Broncos face a very, very tough and stingy Pittsburgh Steelers defense, really led by TJ Watt, who looks like a man on a mission this upcoming season after being robbed of the Defensive Player of the Year award last year. TJ is going to be the one guy the Broncos are going to have to account for. They have, I think, good pass rushers all across the board. If I'm not mistaken, it's TJ Watt. He's obviously lined up on one side. Alex Highsmith is lined up on the other side. I think they got a good rotation of guys there at linebacker. They got Patrick Queen, Landon Roberts there. So they have a stout defense. It's going to make things challenging, not only for Denver's run game, which we will dive deeper into here on today's episode of the show, but I think we have to talk about Bo Nix, the passing game. Like, the pass rush is obviously going to be a key focus here, especially considering that the offensive line for Denver, you go back and you watch the film against the Seahawks, pass protection was inconsistent, sporadic at best at times. There were some times where there was leakage inside the A gap in between the center and Quinn Miners. Quinn Miners missed a couple of blitz pickups there, and Bo luckily has the athleticism to be able to move, but you can't rely on that game in and game out and expect to get away with, some of the other things like making plays with your legs. Like, he had a couple of plays. He had one to Cortland Sutton. But the thing about Bo Nix that I think we all want to see him respond with this week is just looking more comfortable, right? He had a lot of missed opportunities against the Seahawks, specifically on plays that were open. He oversailed one on Cortland Sutton. It was a great play design by Sean Payton. Josh Reynolds freed up Cortland against zone coverage. Well, what's it going to be like this week? You are going to see some zone from the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, no doubt about it, especially after they watched the Seattle tape. But Sean Payton even said in our Monday conference call that we had with him is that, no disrespect to the Seattle Seahawks defense, he says the defense that we are facing this week, and he's referencing the Steelers, he says they're a little bit more experienced. They're a little bit more of a unit that's been playing at a high level for quite some time, and it is all led there by TJ Watt. So this will be a big challenge, potentially a bigger challenge than what the Broncos faced here in week 1. And the question we all have, I think, in terms of, okay, how do you keep Bo Nix upright in this game? Well, what's the status of left tackle Garrett Bowles? X-rays, MRIs came back on the ankle clean. He's got a bone bruise there. More than likely, you'll see him with a heavily taped ankle on Sunday against the Steelers. But I imagine we're going to see a lot of 12, 13 personnel. We might even see the jumbo package a little bit, which, if you're wondering, that used to be Quinn Bailey reporting as eligible. Now it'll be number 79 reporting as eligible. Granted that Garrett Bowles plays this week. He was the jumbo package. Matt Parrott was the jumbo package guy this past weekend against the Seattle Seahawks. And look, I think against a guy like TJ Watt, wouldn't be surprised if you see, okay, you're going to have a right tackle, Mike McGlinchey, lined up there. You're going to have a tight end. You're going to have an extra offensive tackle there in the jumbo package, maybe 2 or 3 guys to try to block TJ Watt. I mean, how do you get a guy like Bo Nix in rhythm, or how do you get him to make some plays when you are going to see aggressive blitzes? Patrick Queen's going to blitz. Minkah Fitzpatrick at times is going to walk down from the safety position, and he's going to blitz the quarterback. So you're going to see a lot of different looks. I think the challenge here early on in week 1 is, okay, you see what they did week 1 there. You see how they maybe played the Atlanta Falcons defensively when you're going through your scouting process. How are they going to line up against the Broncos, whose offense didn't have a great showing? What are they going to do that's going to pin the Broncos back a little bit? And what can Denver do to maybe counterpunch here? I think a lot of it is, okay, come out early, get the run game going for Bo Nix to start. You know, if you have Bo Nix coming out there trying to do play action, drop back passes, okay, try to find if he can get into rhythm. But a lot of Denver's first passes on Sunday against Seattle, they were quick passes behind the line of scrimmage. They were quick outlets where guys were getting extra yards after the catch. And then a lot of the times the Seattle Seahawks defense, they buckled down. So for me, I think Bo Nix and this offense must bounce back here. In terms of being able to counter the blitz, I think Bo is very smart at recognizing where the blitz is coming from and being able to fire the ball out in that regard there. But look for the replacements in coverage. If you're going to be sending a guy from the nickel or the safety position, you have to capitalize against that pressure. And you can't just sit back and let a guy like TJ Watt wreak havoc against you. So keeping an eye on that. And look, we didn't even mention at this point, when you look at the Steelers defense, Cameron Hayward is going to be playing the defensive tackle position. Larry Ogunjobi's also there at the Steelers defensive line. Like, they have talent. They're going to try to make Bo Nix's life a little bit miserable. You have Joey Porter Jr. at corner. He's obviously a very talented young and up-and-coming cornerback. They have Dante Jackson at the other cornerback spot. And then in their nickel, it's Beanie Bishop there. But aside from that, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott at the safety position. This is a Steelers defense that is going to come after Bo Nix and the Broncos offense. And I think we're very, very curious to see how they respond. And a big part of that, to be honest with you, is trying to get the run game going. When you go back and you look at the tape from week 1, Denver's run game wasn't efficient enough. There were some missed opportunities, but there was an opportunity here this week, as you look at the tail of the tape, to take advantage, try to get the run game going, especially early on in this game. That's going to be a major key for the Broncos offense bouncing back. We'll highlight the run game more here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. Today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, FanDuel is offering all customers a very, very special deal, especially as the start of the NFL season is here. If you're a FanDuel customer, you place a $5 bet, you will get 3 weeks of a free trial to NFL Sunday Ticket, powered by YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you live out of market, you can catch your favorite team, whether they're home, whether they're on the road. You never miss out on the action. And all you have to do is get involved in the action on FanDuel Sportsbook. The Broncos, they are 3-point home underdogs this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can place a $5 bet if you think the Broncos will cover the spread, if you think they're going to win the money line, and you can get a 3-week free trial to NFL Sunday Ticket now through September 22nd. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game from the comfort of your home, and all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. The Broncos' run game with Javonte Williams, Audric Estime, and Jaleel McLaughlin will be imperative this week for Sean Payton if Denver's offense is hoping to bounce back and get back into the win column versus starting off 0-2. We'll highlight why it's important and what they can do to manufacture some touches against a Steelers defense that will present them with some challenges. Real quick, I want to say thanks once again to all the everydayers out there in Broncos country. We appreciate you so much for making us your first listen. Don't forget to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And for your second listen of the day, go check out the brand new Locked On NFL, where you get 2 episodes every day. In the mornings, you get the Madman, you get Tyler Rowland. He's also the host of the Locked On Titans podcast. He goes through and he breaks down some of the biggest storylines in the NFL. But then for a little bit more barbershop, chill type of conversation around the NFL, Tony Wiggins has you covered in the evenings on Locked On NFL. Make sure you check it out. 2 episodes per day, different spectrums, plus insight from the local experts. You get to hear on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've been hammering it home all throughout the week. You've heard me on social media, whether you follow me on Threads, whether you follow me on Twitter. I'm using Threads a lot more these days, but also here in the YouTube comments, the run game is going to be so important here for Sean Payton and the Broncos offense if they hope to bounce back against TJ Watt and this defense. I think if we take a quick look at the tail of the tape from a statistical output early on here, just after week 1 of the NFL season, Pittsburgh's defense in terms of overall net yards per game, they're the 4th-ranked defense coming into this matchup, only allowing 226 total yards against the Atlanta Falcons, who have a very, very talented running back in Bijan Robinson. They limited him. They also held them to about 4.52 yards per play, which is good for 10th right now in the NFL. And they're the 2nd-ranked defense right now when it comes to points allowed. Granted, after 1 week, the sample size could vary here between a point, 0.2 points, but they're only allowing 10 points per game right now, obviously after they held the Falcons to 10 in week 1 of the season opener, but they also held that rushing attack there for Atlanta to 89 yards on the ground, which comes in ranked 10th right now in the National Football League. From a passing standpoint, they're 7th right now. They only allowed 137 net passing yards from Kirk Cousins. They pressured him. They sacked him. They also forced him to throw a couple of interceptions. That right there is going to be the same formula that they're going to try to use against Bo Nix, though I will say Bo is a lot more mobile than Kirk Cousins, but they can't simply rely on that. They're going to have to embrace the running back by committee approach here, and I'm very curious to see if there is a rhythm associated to it, right? Javonte Williams' first carry against Seattle on Sunday, it was a 9-yard burst where you saw the explosiveness. You saw the things that we've been talking about during training camp with Javonte. You saw it on that play. And then the next play, he slips and he loses a yard behind the line of scrimmage. Sean came out and he told us in his Monday conference call that there were opportunities in the run game that, there were times where the offensive line could have blocked better. The run blocking assignments were missed at times. But he said that there were missed opportunities by the running backs, by Audric Estime, by Javonte, and by Jaleel McLaughlin, where there's a run that's there, and if they hit the right hole or if they see it where it should go, they might have a more positive gain. Instead, he talked about how they went nowhere, they went backwards, or they only got 1 or 2 yards per pop there in the run game. And certainly when you look at the statistics, it shows. You go back on the film, you take away Bo Nix's scrambles or his runs that he had in this game, Denver, between 3 tailbacks that they had there, only ran for 64 yards. That is not a formula for winning football games. And look, granted, Denver was in this game. Denver had a lead in the first half against the Seattle Seahawks where they could have found ways to run the football. They could have stuck with it. They pressed a little bit. They got a little bit pass happy there, and you saw some of Bo Nix's struggles associated with that. But if you get the run game going, right, and I'm talking about how do you do it against this Steelers defense? Well, you have 2 guys on the outside edge in Watt and Highsmith who are very good, who maintain edge contain quite a bit, but also you got a guy like Watt who can absolutely destroy your offensive tackle and blow up your run play in the backfield. This is not the type of week, in my opinion, for the Broncos to get creative and do jet sweep end-around plays that we saw last year with a guy like Marvin Mims. As much as we want to see Marvin, that play's got to get out of the playbook because when he's in, there's certain indications that he may be running that play, and the defense is certainly going to account for number 19 when he's on the field or if he's condensed closer to the formation. That right there, I guarantee you, if I'm seeing that here, and I love defense, I'm a defensive coach at heart, but if I'm seeing that, you got to believe that those guys in Pittsburgh, they're seeing that, and they're counting for every single option here this upcoming week. You can't get too cute in the run game. You got to get downhill. So how do you do that? Try to get in between the tackles. Look, you're going to have your hands full with Cam Hayward. You're going to have your hands full with Patrick Queen and the linebackers filling in there. Safeties coming up and run support. You have to find a way to just rattle off 3 or 4 yards of carry. Whether you're running counter, trap, inside zone, outside zone, it doesn't matter. But find a way to get forward yardage this upcoming week. And as cliche as that sounds, Denver can get back to basics here, and it can make things a little bit easier there for Bo, I think, for the offensive cohesion. But how do you figure out who's going to get the touches? Who do you think is going to get the hot hand? I feel like if you look at Seattle's game, there really wasn't somebody with a hot hand. Jaleel had 10 touches for 27 yards. He had the fumble. You can't have that. That was a frustrating play for him. I know he wants that one back. Javonte had 8 touches for 23 yards. That's not nearly enough. And you have to be able against this defense to try to run the football. And look, I think when we look at it from, okay, you look at the matchups on paper, you look at the player personnel that the Steelers have defensively, you compare it to Denver's offensively, and it looks very outmatched. Like the Broncos look a little outmatched in this game here against the Steelers because of the guys that they have, but they also were outmatched on paper last year against the Cleveland Browns and that vaunted defense that they had there led by Myles Garrett. Where are some areas that you can attack TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, and Patrick Queen in terms of getting the run game going? There has to be some diversification, and you have to be able to be efficient. Like if Denver, for example, is run the ball on second down, let's say it's 2nd and 7, they're running the ball and they're only getting a couple yards or they're going backwards. Everyone knows how to play you on 3rd down, but they're just going to take a page out of the Seahawks book and play back of the sticks, keep everything in front, rally and tackle if you throw it short, or try to get home on a sack pressure. I mean, that is where I think it gets so hard. There's no rhyme or reason. There is no true formula except execution here. And to me, I think the hot hand has to start with Javonte Williams. You need to force feed him this upcoming week. And depending on the situation, I feel like there's a method to the madness. With Javonte, you get a combination of someone who can continue to run through contact. You get a guy who can also be athletic and a little bit elusive, as we've seen Javonte pre-ACL. I see the same traits of what we saw in his rookie year from what he has. It just didn't show up in Sunday's game against Seattle. And then I look at Audric Estime, the big, bruising, physical presence that he has. And part of me is wondering, why can't this be a game where you run heavy with the rock, with Javonte, with Audric Estime? And then look, if let's say that there is a long drive, let's say Denver finds a way to get a 8 or 9 play drive, and maybe you can extend it to a few more plays there. But if that Steelers defense, if you find a way to wear them down or keep them on the field a little bit longer, then that's where you add in a little bit of sprinkle of Jaleel McLaughlin, because he's the change of pace guy. That, to me, I think has to be Denver's mindset. I think you need to have a heavy emphasis with Javonte in between the tackles alongside, obviously, Audric Estime, but also in that short yardage situations. Don't be afraid this week to go 2 back. Like if you have Michael Burton elevated again, that's fine. You can have the fullback there, but who's to say you can't go with shotgun? You can't have Audric Estime to one side, Javonte Williams to the other, and you can do some creative stuff off of that. That's just something I'm encouraging maybe Denver to look at, because then teams are going to align against you a little bit differently. They may stack the box if you have 2 backs of that stature there. And then all of a sudden, maybe it frees up something in the passing game in the short to intermediate, because now you're going to have manageable second downs or a manageable 3rd down. And then maybe you get some things rolling here. There is no answer. Like, I'm not saying that if Denver does this, they're going to win, but these are some things that they have to try. And certainly Sean Payton wants to get the run game going here for Denver's offense this upcoming week, because, hey, it will take pressure off of Bo Nix, who we talked about in segment number 1. So continue to find a way to pound the rock there, get creative, but don't be too fancy. Don't be too cute with the Marvin Mims end around stuff, or any other player for that matter. Find a way to do the little things. I think so much. I've been asked this week here in the build up to week 2, what do the Broncos need to focus on against Pittsburgh? And my answer has been plain and simple. While you have to account for some of the things that the Steelers are going to do or try to do to you from a defensive standpoint against your offense that has struggled so far after week 1 of the season, you have to focus on you. You have to clean up the things that impacted your overall offensive production in week 1, because if these issues continue to pile up and persist and you don't correct them, it's going to be a long season here for Denver. So focus on yourself, get those issues corrected, and then I think everything else will take care of itself along the way. But a lot of it is alignment, assignment, execution, and being able to fight for some extra yards, because Denver's going to have to fight and claw this week against that Steelers defense if they're going to have a chance to win their home opener in front of everybody at Empower Field at Mile High. And look, Broncos Country, always eager for your thoughts as well. What is something you'd like to see from the Broncos run game to get it going here in week 2 that could help the Broncos offense find the solutions that they need earlier rather than later? And while the offseason showcase week 2 is a potential revenge game for quarterback Russell Wilson, it seems like the Broncos' emphasis this week will be to prepare for Justin Fields. Don't believe us? Ask Mike Tomlin yourself. We'll break down that matchup and what Denver needs to do this week against some of Pittsburgh's talented offensive personnel. You're going to get all that here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at eBay Motors. And if you're looking for something for your vehicle, eBay Motors has everything that you could be looking for. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your number one ride or die alive through eBay Motors, because eBay Motors, they have everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. You want to make some upgrades to the ride? Well, eBay Motors, they've got you covered, whether that's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. You get all the parts that you need at the prices that you want. You can make it easy to make your car the MVP in your day-to-day through eBay Motors. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. The Broncos defense will have a little bit of a challenge with the athletic dynamic that a player like Justin Fields presents, but with revamped front seven, with revamped outside linebacker play, and a secondary that actually played really well against the Seattle Seahawks. And when you match it up against the Pittsburgh Steelers personnel, you start to feel a little bit confident that, hey, maybe this could be an area where the Broncos capitalize this upcoming week. We'll break down all of that and much more here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. I think the biggest storyline this week, in the offseason when Russell Wilson signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, everyone was circling, even Russ himself was circling, hey, week 2, gets to go back to the Mile High City, gets to go play in front of the Broncos, who discarded him. And look, I think his reception, he would have been met with loud boos here on Sunday, but all signs, according to Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin, kind of came out and gave like, hey, we're not trying to be strategic. We're not trying to be secretive. He said, our plan this week is really to have Justin Fields prepare and get all the reps this week as if he's the starter, because he said Russell Wilson is not healthy. He's not going to be able to do much in practice this week. He's got a calf injury that's been lingering since training camp. It held him out week 1. And I think Justin Fields did some things really well for the Steelers from an offensive operation in Sunday's season opener against the Atlanta Falcons that, hey, okay, maybe you give him a chance. You see what you can do here. I mean, he's got talented weapons at the wide receiver position. You get George Pickens, who more than likely we'll see Patrick Surtain against him. Van Jefferson anticipated to be the number 2 receiver there. Riley Moss against him. But then you have some other guys that can impact and get in the mix at the tight end position. Obviously, Pat Freiermuth, very, very talented. We've seen that the Broncos, at least last year, they have struggled against some of those bigger body tight ends. Freiermuth is a very, very talented player. There's Calvin Austin III, who's got some speed and explosiveness that is also going to add a dynamic into what the Broncos, are hoping to avoid inside of this matchup here. But I think when you look at it, the Steelers, their injury report, some changes on the offensive line, they're playing with some banged up guys. The key is going to make sure you keep edge contained against Justin Fields. You know what he can do. And last year, for some reason, he lit up the Broncos in that one game in week 4. I mean, the Broncos, they trailed pretty significantly going into halftime of that game. That lead extended into the third quarter, and then Denver came storming back because of because of Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito. You had the strip sack, you had the scoop and score. That's a big dynamic. I came away very impressed with what I saw from Jonathan Cooper and Baron Browning as the 2 starters at outside linebacker. I thought Nick Bonito had a couple of plays where he came close to knocking the ball out of Geno Smith's hands. The overall, in terms of the front 7, like Denver's revamped defensive line with JFM, with Zach Allen, DJ Jones, those guys did a terrific job against the Seahawks. And really, the big things where things got away from them in that second half, really in that third quarter, was that Seahawks changed the tempo up. They went no huddle, and they started to capitalize. You rip off a couple of big gains, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're bleeding from somewhere. Where do you stop it? You don't have time to substitute personnel. You don't have time to really adjust. You have to line back up and try to say, okay, this is the formation we're lining up against. What coverage are we in? And then Denver got gashed there to open up the second half. I thought in the fourth quarter they did a great job of adjusting there. And I think that this week it'll be a little bit more of a sound performance. You have a week of tape of the starters playing here in the NFL with that offense, with Justin Fields getting run at quarterback. Denver's defense played drastically better than most people are going to give them credit for against the Seahawks, minus that third quarter letdown. And obviously they had a blown coverage that even when I was doing the film breakdown, Brian Baldinger, myself, we were confused why Malcolm Roach at defensive tackle is dropping back into coverage to go cover a running back. And then no one covers the running back and he scores a wide open touchdown. You lose 26-20. Things like that make a huge difference in the outcome of a game, right? So I think Denver, with some of the areas that they got impacted negatively against the Seahawks, I think they're going to adjust. But, a lot of this is going to be the Steelers trying to use the run game. Justin Fields can use his legs. You have Najee Harris, who is obviously a big physical bruising tailback. You got Jaylen Warren, who is a guy that can absolutely gash you with speed. Like, he's a very, very talented tailback. I would say between those two guys, you have some really good playmakers. Then obviously there's Cordarrelle Patterson, who can be a little bit of a hybrid Swiss Army knife, can line up at running back, can line up at receiver, can do a lot of different things here. So I'm very curious to see the Steelers' game plan. I imagine they want to come out here and try to run the football, especially after they saw Kenneth Walker's stat line. And maybe there's some things that they could take advantage, including going no huddle, going up tempo against Denver's defense. Don't be surprised if that's an area of emphasis here for the Steelers offense this week when Justin Fields and them come to town. Now, look, there is still probably maybe a little bit of a chance that Russell Wilson can play. He may play, but right now, as Mike Tomlin said, he said, I have nothing to hide at this point. He said, there's no point of beating around the bush. Like, we're going to try to get some preparation in this week with Justin and see what you can get from him, because Russ isn't 100%. And look, while Russ would love to push it and would love to go out there and play, Mike Tomlin's not the type of guy that's going to do that. Like, Mike is going to do whatever he can to put the Steelers in a position to win. I think he does a great job as a head coach in terms of, how to adjust and how to get the best out of his players. So Denver this week, even though I think when you look at it on paper, the Steelers don't have a ton of exciting firepower offensively. We'll talk about, obviously, George Pickens. He is talented. Pat Fryermuth's talented. But in comparison to what they faced last week against the Seahawks, the Steelers offense doesn't necessarily match up as well, I think, with Denver's defense, the way that maybe Seattle did. And even then, Denver's defense made it hard on Seattle for 3/4 of that game. So there's a lot to look into here as we continue to go about here on Locked On Broncos. There's going to be a buildup all week long. And look, Broncos country doesn't get any bigger than Thursday, because Thursday, it is crossover Thursday. Myself, Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, we're going to sit down and we're going to preview this matchup. What are the biggest storylines of the Broncos? What are the biggest storylines of the Steelers? And what are some of the matchups that could define the outcome of this game? That's something we'll break down on Crossover Thursday, powered by our friends over there at Prize Picks. And for all you everydayers, you can expect all of that and much more on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Don't forget, for your second listen today, after making Locked On Broncos your first, go check out the Locked On NFL podcast, the newly revamped one with Tyler, Roland, and also Tony Wiggins. You get a morning episode, you get an evening episode, 2 different vibes, but NFL coverage, you get the best of it there. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Broncos country, we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.